that you are doing well today. In today's session, we will continue speaking about the African civilization and the civilization that started to arose in the continent of Africa, which is the second most populated continent in the world, beside the second largest continent also in our world today. Of course, we have already spoken about the continent in Africa. Speaking about Africa, we have mentioned that Africa has most of the minerals of the whole world. Let's just do this. My laptop is dying. There is nothing in between, unfortunately. So, while speaking about Africa, guys, we have said that Africa is considered to be the second largest populated continent in the world, besides also the second largest continent in the world. The geography of Africa has helped to mingle its civilization and to have a variety of civilization. At first, we will have here to the northern of the continent, most of this area is called the Sahara Desert. Sahara Desert. Of course, this area is just like the area we are living here in KSA. So the same circumstances and also the same features. Dry climate and there is no humidity most of the year. And just in the middle here in this place, we will have this very green area is called the rainforest area. The rainforest area. Of course, that's because the equator lies or moves from this place. Here we have the equator, and of course the sun rays are vertical all of the year. Consequently, we have rain most of the year, and here we have the Sahara Desert. The area beneath the Sahara Desert is known as the Savannah. The Savannah. Sahara Desert. Here we have the rainforest, and beneath the rainforest we have the Savannah, which contains a very, very tall grass, and the area here is plain. To that part here of the continent, we have a mountainous region. All of these parts are containing of mountains. That's a mountainous region in this place, and also this place has a mountainous region. Another part of the Sahara Desert we have also is this part here to the south. Also, we have here Sahara. So simply, the continent itself has many, many features. And of course, beneath all of that, we have the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea. All of these seas right now help it to just in the process of migration. And not always the continent of Africa was like this climate change or this geographical feature. It was like 2,500 years ago, the Sahara here, it was a well-watered area, and there was vegetation in that area. So we had many, many plants. So in today's session, we'll speak about one of the most oldest civilization that arose in Africa, which is Nubia and Egypt. Nubia and Egypt and the Egyptian people. In this area here of nowadays Egypt and Sudan. Okay, in this part here we have a civilization called the Nubian Civilization. Nubian Civilization. The Nubian people, they were originated in this area here, which is part of Sudan nowadays, and also parts here of nowadays Aswan. And those people started to move toward this Thebes, the capital city of the ancient Egyptian civilization, and they started to mingle with the Egyptian people. And later, after the Egyptian, the Nubian has already taken control of Egypt for several years, as we have already studied while studying the Egyptian civilization at the first semester. So, to speak about Egypt and Nubia, how they started to flourish regarding this civilization. Abdurrahman, can you start reading, please?
Okay. Egypt and Nubia flourish. Why Egyptian Civilization was developed along the northern Nile River. Another African civilization took shape on a wide band of fertile land of the southern Nile. The ancient kingdom of Nubia, also called was
Kush.
located in Kush, was located in present-day Sudan. Archaeologists and historians have just begun to document the shifting tides of Nubia's 4,000-year history.
So, we're speaking about civilization that started to arise also here in this place. That's nowadays Egypt. Okay, the ancient Egyptian civilization in Egypt started to arise in the northern part of Egypt. Okay, in this part, they started to rise exactly in this part of Egypt. And later, when King Minas came, he started to unite both northern Egypt and southern Egypt, and the whole civilization arose in that whole area. And later, Thutmose came, and they started to take even parts of nowadays Syria, Palestine, etc. So while doing all of this, so that was the Egyptian civilization. After flourishing, took all of that area, or even they started to take all of that area, to be exact. So at the peak of the Egyptian civilization, all of that land was under the Egyptian control. While doing so, there was another civilization that started to arise in that part, called the Nubian Civilization. Nubian Civilization. They have lived alongside with the ancient Egyptian people for hundreds of years until the ancient Egyptian came to decline and they started to march towards the north. And once marching towards the north, they started to take control of Egypt and they lived as the ancestor of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt because they have lived with them and along them for thousands of years. So we can say that Nubian civilization, and by the way, the Nubian, they still live nowadays in Egypt. Still, their civilization is being perspective and they are practicing their own language. And they even have a language of their own that none of all the Egyptian know. Okay, the Nubian language. All right, so the Nubian people always, for along the history, they have lived alongside with the ancient Egyptian until they mingled with the Egyptian people and they became Egyptian. You cannot differentiate them. They only have a little bit dark skin and their language is close to strange language for the Egyptian, not the Egyptian language. And they have a language of their own. Even in the war of October War, 1973, when the Egyptian army didn't know how to even transform or transform the information or transport the information on the radio because the Israeli army was listening to them. So one of them advised, one of the Nubian people advised to just speak using the Nubian language because it's very strange and not even the Egyptian people are capable of speaking it. It's a very, very hard one and it's only centralized in Nuba and the Nubian people. Not anyone can do that. So archaeologists really have traced the history of Nubian people for approximately 4,000 years. So we are speaking about the era of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. And this proves that the Nubian people have lived alongside with the ancient Egyptians for thousands of years. To speak about Nubia and Egypt, actually they both are considered to be one civilization, two great powers. Okay, but the Nubian people consider themselves as Egyptian, and the Egyptian people acknowledge the Nubian to be Egyptian people. There is no two civilizations or something. All right, so two great powers. Abdullah Trayan. Abdullah, still with us? I believe not. Abdullah Al-Haydari. سلمان السويلم، مشعل الحناكي، عبد الرحمن المديفر، أحمد.
Teacher, this is Hydri or Ryan?
I called your name, Abdullah. You can
Okay,
read it.
your voice is so laggy.
I'm sorry, I think that Teams is lagging today. There is a little bit problem in Teams today. It's not my voice, it's Teams, guys. So can you read, please, Abdullah?
What?
Can you read?
Okay. From time to time, amphibious. No. Can you spell, teacher?
From time to time, ambitious Egyptian pharaohs. Ambitious means looking forward to the future. Ambitious.
Egyptian pharaohs subdued Nubia, but the Nubians also regained their independence. As a result of conquest and trade, Nubian rulers adopted many Egyptian traditions. They built palaces and pyramids modeled on Egyptian style. They used Egyptian titles and worshipped Egyptian deities. About 730 BC, Nubian king Pakhandi conquered Egypt for a century. Nubian kings ruled Egypt, but Nubian armies did not match the Southeast Asia. To retreat from Egypt,
Could
the
not match
Nubians
iron weapons.
are weapons of Assyrians who invaded from Southwest Asia. Forced to retreat from Egypt, the Nubians returned to the south.
So we were speaking about how the Nubian people have long lived with the ancient Egyptian pharaohs alongside, and also the ancient Egyptian. Usually, sometimes they would just march towards the south here to the Nubian people to take control of the land of Nubia, just to rule them, not to kill them, because long ago they have lived in just one place. There was no border here between Egypt and Sudan. All of that area was the Egyptian area. So the Egyptian people will just march to in order to increase the land. And the Nubian people have lived alongside with the ancient Egyptian for over than some millennia. Later, when the ancient Egyptian pharaohs started to decline, the Nubian people gained power and they started to march toward the north. Once they marched towards the north, they had control of Egypt and they ruled Egypt as a descendant of the pharaohs because they believed that they were Egyptian people. They were just like the Egyptian, were ruled one time by the pharaohs, and now they are controlling power. So they will just live for Egypt and control Egypt. But later, of course, the Assyrian people started to come, as we have already studied, with their iron-making weapons, and they started to invade Egypt. And later, the Nubian people started to head south once again, but later, of course, they were defeated. So to speak about Nubia and Egypt, two great powers, once again, they lived alongside for more than millennia, and once the ancient Egyptian pharaohs started to decline, the Nubian people started to gain power and march towards the north until the Assyrians came and had them move to the south. The Nubian trade and iron. By 500 BC, Nubian ruler had moved their capital from Napata to Meroe. Meroe eventually commanded both the Nile's north-south trade route and also east-west trade route from the Red Sea to the north of Africa. Along this wide trade network, Nubia sent gold, ivory, animals. That's very important. Nubia sent gold, ivory, animal skin, perfume, and also slaves to the Mediterranean world and Southwest Asia. That's a very important point in trade. Meroe's location was a major reason for its development into a successful center of commerce. If you went here to the maps, In that location here, along the river Nile, was the city of Merwi, directly to the south of Egypt. And all of that area was once controlled by the Egyptian pharaohs, and later the Nubian people started to head north in order to gain power. So, because of the location of Merwi, it was a major reason for its development into a successful center of commerce, because it had traded with the most important civilization back then, which is the Egyptian civilization. Eventually important or equally important, however, was the region's resources. Merwi was rich in iron ore, which was used in order to make the weapons. Fueled by the region's large quantities of timber, the smelting furnaces of Merwi produced the iron tools and weaponry needed to feed, control, and even defeat the kingdom. Today, giant heaps of iron waste remains as evidence of the ancient Merwi industry. So simply because of its location and its ability to have some minerals, including the iron, which was used in making the weapons and was used in order to control other nations and civilization. So it became a very, very important city back then that helped into mingling civilization with the ancient Egyptian and even defeating other civilization. And it was like a center for trade for those Nubian people. And eventually, of course, as any other civilization, splendor and decline. Although Nubia absorbed much from Egypt, Nubian culture later followed its own course. For example, after gaining independence from Egypt, Nubians worshipped their own gods, including Abidamak, which is the lion-headed warrior god, a Merwi artist's style reflected a greater sense of freedom than Egyptian style did. Nubians also created their own system of writing using an alphabet instead of hieroglyphs, which is for the Egyptian people. Unfortunately, the Nubian alphabet has not yet been deciphered, meaning that it's still a secret nowadays. That's why I tell you they use it as a secret. It's secret for some people in the world, but the European people, some of them still can read and write in that language. After, of course, the joint region of King Katamani and also Queen Aminetri in the 1st century AD, the splendor of Nubia's golden age dimmed. Finally, about 350 AD, King Izana's armies from the kingdom of Axiom overwhelmed Nubia, and the decline of Nubia was made in the year 350 AD. So, simply to speak about the Nubian people, we will see that the Nubian people, they were great civilization that lived thousands of years ago along with the ancient Egyptian people.
Money does. This video is part of Project Africa, a collaboration of over 25 history YouTubers. More info on that at the end of the program. If you go to the British Museum on any given day, you might run into Augustus. Well, not him, but a sculpture of his head. Though technically he never claimed the title, Augustus is considered to be the first emperor of the Roman Empire. This particular head is one of many thousands of artifacts that make up the museum's extensive collection. However, this particular artifact has a really interesting story, where it wasn't found in the city of Rome, the Italian peninsula, Europe, or even within the confines of what was once the Roman Empire. It was found amongst the ruins of the ancient city of Meroe, located today in what is modern Sudan. That's right, in Sudan, in the middle of what today is a sparsely populated desert. Of course, Meroe wasn't always like this. It was once the capital of one of the most incredible empires of the ancient world, one that is often skipped in many world history books, or at best, overshadowed by its ancient neighbor to the north, Egypt. It's kind of a shame, because the great civilization and empire that Meroe was once the center of had a tremendous impact on our world today. The civilization I'm referring to is that of ancient Nubia and the kingdom of Kush. So without further ado, let's begin. Let's take a look at this place we call Nubia. First, let's clarify the term. Nubia defines a geographic region that's located in the northeast corner of Africa. Today, this region would encompass the southern end of Egypt and the northern half of modern Sudan. Running through the center of it is the great Nile River. Nubia is generally broken up into two parts according to the direction that the Nile flows. Lower Nubia is in the north, while Upper Nubia is in the south. This at first is a bit confusing, but keep in mind, for the Nubians as well as the Egyptians, their north was the direction from where the source of the Nile was, not the Mediterranean Sea, where it emptied out. Upper Nubia was also the heartland of the kingdom of Kush. The Nile itself is divided by a series of rapids called cataracts, which have throughout time served as natural boundaries for different regions within Nubia. These cataracts formed when the river ran into outcrops of hard rock, forming a system of unnavigable rapids. The first cataract, Araswan, is where Nubia begins. The last one, the Sixth Cataract, is just north of the modern Sudanese capital of Khartoum. So where does the name Nubia come from? Many believe that it's derived from the word Nub, which means gold in the ancient Egyptian language. Others believe that the name comes from tribes that settled there called the Nuba or Noba. However, perhaps a more common name for this region was Taseti, meaning land of the bow, due to the region's highly skilled archers. Nubian can also be an ambiguous term. As a people, the ancient Nubians weren't made up of a single group. In fact, they were extremely diverse, with different ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, languages, and even religious beliefs. Since the earliest historical records that mention it, Nubia and Kush had been tied, for better or worse, to the land of Egypt. In fact, most of our information about ancient Nubia and Kush would come from Egyptian sources. This can be a bit problematic, not because Egyptians weren't good at recording history, but because Egypt and the peoples of Nubia were great rivals. Due to this, there may be, and often are, biases in Egyptian accounts of their interactions with the Nubian people, which is another thing that we should be aware of. Nubia has been occupied since the earliest periods of human history. It's almost impossible to know for sure just how far this habitation goes back, but by around 13,000 BCE, the Nubians were quite advanced, and we know this because there is a lot of evidence of complex tools, arrowheads, and even cemeteries that have been found all over Nubia. By 5000 BCE, we start to see the people of this region begin to transition into a more settled life consisting of farming and animal husbandry. Buildings and houses were being built of mud brick and stone instead of straw. Copper and gold were commonly being used for tools and luxury items such as jewelry. In fact, gold seems to have been in ample supply in Nubia, and for mainly this reason, the Egyptians became interested in the place. The first time that we hear of an Egyptian incursion into Nubia is during the reign of the Egyptian pharaoh Djejer. In an inscription from around 3000 BCE and dating to Egypt's first dynasty, we're told that the pharaoh's forces came into conflict with and defeated a band of Nubians. Another mention of conflict with the Nubians is on the famous Palermo Stone, which is part of a stele that records the names and deeds of Egypt's Old Kingdom pharaohs. It tells how the pharaoh Senefru took 7,000 Nubians as prisoner, along with 200,000 cattle and sheep. By the 4th and 5th dynasties of Egypt, or around 2500 to 2400 BCE, there were well-established Egyptian colonies in Nubia by the Second Cataract, mostly for mining and smelting gold and copper. The early dynasties in Egypt did their best to avoid large-scale conflicts in Nubia. This was due to several reasons. One was that the people of Nubia were known to be fiercely independent and hard to control. They also recognized that a stable, commercially viable Nubia was in everyone's best interest. Therefore, as long as trade between the two lands flowed without interruption, the pharaohs were, for the most part, willing to abandon any plans of annexing lands south of the Second Cataract. However, by around 2100 BCE, things had changed. Though it's unclear as to what was the initial cause, armed conflicts between groups of Nubians and Egyptian forces were a constant occurrence. Details are murky, but Egypt must have felt threatened because the pharaohs built a string of fortresses with massive walls in between the Second and Third Cataracts. But why? What had caused this total reversal of policy and seemed to be so threatening to Egypt? The answer may have been the rise of a new Nubian power just beyond the Third Cataract of the Nile, the city of Kerma. From what we know, the city of Kerma was likely established around the year 2400 BCE. Its location just south of the Third Cataract had two distinct advantages. One was that to get there from Egypt, ships had to first unload and go ashore if they wanted to continue down the Nile further into Africa. So, if you were an invading army from Egypt, you couldn't simply sail all the way to Kerma. You'd have to unload your troops and any supplies before you hit the Third Cataract, or else be destroyed by its fierce rapids and sharp rocks. If you were a commercial or trading vessel, you had to do the same with your crew and any cargo. However, once you were beyond the Third Cataract, you'd need a place to rest, recharge, and probably resupply your ship. And that's where Kerma came in. Not only could merchants rest, recharge, and resupply, but Kerma also provided a market for traders coming from the north to exchange goods with those who lived further south down the Nile. Thus, the city's location provided both defense and potential for profit, making it a great base for a flourishing kingdom. Many scholars call this kingdom the First Kingdom of Kush. By around 1850 BCE, Kerma's influence had grown so much that it was a direct threat to Egypt. According to an inscription found at the Egyptian site of El Kab, Nubians attacked and looted the city, carrying off alabaster vases, copper daggers, statues, and other valuable items. In response, the Egyptians launched a punitive expedition into Nubia, but the damage to Egyptian prestige had already been done. The fact that Nubians could launch such brazen attacks well above the Second Cataract was great cause for alarm. There wasn't much, though, that the pharaoh could.
Of course, all of this results in the conflict or the uprising conflict between both the Egyptian people and the Nubian people over the course of history until trade have mingled and started to combine both of them together. But once again, we can say that both the civilization, the ancient Egyptian, and also the Nubian civilization, both of them have always been neighboring civilization, and trade happened between both of them, and even the Nubian people, both of them sell this as the direct descendant of the Pharaoh or the ancient Egyptian civilization. Any questions so far, grade 9, about the Nubian civilization?
No, thank you.
All right. I think we still have another session, the 5th session. I'll be substituting Mr. Muhammad Khan because he's absent today, so all the best. See you next session. Bye.
For the next period,